nearly been caught on the nose. Down on the ice they go as McCormick teed off on Tyson Strachan.
Welcome to the Hockey Family Podcast. I'm Tyson Strachan, and those clips that you just heard are a few of the bad decisions that I made throughout my career. We've obviously created this podcast, to give an opportunity for some other hockey players to come on and talk about, hopefully, some good advice that they have. They can talk about some of those harder lessons that they learned as well. And as always, I'm joined by my former D partner at the Ohio State University.
Don't say the.
Oh, yeah, it's the. You have to say the. It's Johan Kroll, CFA, CFP, the founder of our firm. And he's going to chat a little bit now.
Yeah, really excited to have Karl Alzner on the podcast today. Another guest that actually was a teammate of both Strax and myself at one time or another. And when I came in this morning to the office, I actually looked up and like, Karl, there you are. You're right up there when we won a championship in Hershey. I think that was, 09 or 10, so 2010 maybe.
Sounds about right. Yeah, just always looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. Karl's won too many of them. He doesn't even remember years. He's got back-to-backs.
Yeah.
I had a good run. of things, and then it just halted pretty quick after that. As it does for most.
Yeah, we'll try to get into that.
Karl, just an awesome guy, humble guy, as you can tell. I mean, you include playoffs, well over 700 NHL games, just a really, really fun career. And is actually now back in DC doing some broadcasting. So, Karl, just to start, we'd love to kind of hear some updates from you and how your family's doing.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much. Number 2 on the podcast. That's pretty impressive that you'd even think of me for that. Normally, I'd be a lot further down the line. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. So I guess as it happens for most hockey players, things end earlier than you always hope that they're going to end, right? You have to make a pivot and you're not always necessarily prepared for it. I luckily kind of saw the writing on the wall for me a couple years before I ended up hanging them up and had started planning. And in my plan with my wife, Mandy, was always to come back to DC, right? That was kind of, it felt like home for us. We were here through our whole 20s, and we had so much fun. Memories were unbelievable. People were great. We found ourselves back home during COVID, and we're like, we're not supposed to be here until I'm 40. We were supposed to retire here, right? Like I'm 30, 32 years old. What are we doing? And so we started thinking about it, and it was a very, I guess, a weird pivot to go from playing hockey like I was to what I'm doing now, which is, beside doing some of the broadcast stuff, I'm actually working for a tech company doing cybersecurity sales, which is very, very different than what I ever would have expected. But just to kind of give you the background on how that happens is I'm from Western Canada, and where I was living, Kelowna, BC, it's kind of like, it's like the retired hockey player hotbed, right? That's where we all go to retire and go on the lake and do skiing and all that stuff. And the issue with that is if you want to get into hockey, you're one of 75 or 100 other retired NHL players. Most of them are a lot better than me, had better careers than me. So, you want to coach the Kelowna Rockets? Yeah, right. We got Shea Weber here, who's going to coach the Kelowna Rockets, right? Or you want to run a hockey school? We got Carey Price that's going to run this hockey. You know what I mean? It's just like, geez, I'm just another guy here. Jerome McGinley's coaching a prep school there. So if I wanted to do anything, hockey was really my only option. And, the chances are a lot less. So I had actually talked to my neighbor when I was here, living in Arlington. I don't even know, when I was probably back in 2015. And, it's kind of, I won't get into all the details, but long story short, he was the same age as me, always walking up and down the street on his phone. And he's got nice cars, nice house. And I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing? Because everybody else is at work. This guy's just here on his phone all day. I'm cutting the grass. I know what I do to live in this neighborhood. What does he do? And so finally I flagged him down. I'm just like, hey, I got to ask, like, what are you up to all day? You're always on your phone. And he laughs. He says, well, I'm in cybersecurity sales. And I'm just like, cybersecurity? Like, okay, well, that's kind of foreign for me. Like, tell me more. So we end up talking. An hour goes by, hour and a half. Mandy comes out. She's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to just be plucking weeds and cutting the grass. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry, just talking to the neighbor. And so that became a regular thing. Every week, every 2 weeks, we just go out there and start talking. And then finally, after like a couple months of this, he's like, look, I don't know, how this hockey thing works and how long you're going to play. But when you're done, if you have any interest whatsoever in getting into this industry, like, hit me up. Like, we'll find something for you, because we can always use people that have some sort of resume in this area in DC, and also people that like to talk. And we're out here talking an hour at a time. And so at the time I was like, yeah, okay, no, it's not going to happen. And then sure enough, like I said, writing on the wall, I'm like, what am I going to do? How do I get back to DC? Because we're both Canadian. We don't have a green card. So I hit up my buddy, his name's Dan, and just said, hey, look, I'm trying to find something to do. I'm bored at home. We want to come back to the States. Do you have any ideas? He's like, dude, we'll sponsor you for a visa. Come back out and work for us. Go to dinners, golf tournaments, talk to people. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, that's legit? He says, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, what about vacations? What about summer? Right? Like, I'm used to having summers off. And his exact comment was, like, you see how many vacations I go on? And I'm like, yeah, all the time on Instagram. He says, you can work from wherever in this gig. And I'm like, okay, done. So we moved back here. We ended up selling the place back home and just moving everything over this way. I've been doing that now since January 3rd of last year. So just over a year. And then it's been fun. It's been very busy and it's hard work. It's a lot to learn. But that kind of monopolizes my day to day. And then when I get to go and do some of these broadcasts, it kind of, keeps my foot in the door of hockey, because I was always told, if you leave the hockey world, it's hard to come back unless you're a Gretzky, or a huge name, a Messier, whatever. It's extremely hard to get back. And so yeah, I do that on the side, and it just gives me the fix that I need to be in the hockey world. So long-winded answer. Back in DC, cybersecurity, tech sales, government sales, and a little bit of hockey on the side.
Karl, that's awesome. And, and just like what we do for a living, and like we see a lot of guys, making that transition, right, from a hockey career. And it's just wonderful that you've been able to make that transition into something you enjoy. And that you can still, stay involved, like you mentioned, with some broadcasting. So that's really awesome to hear. And just to like rewind a little bit, just in terms of like advice, we always like to kind of start, whether when you're younger or maybe in junior or even later in your professional career, like what would you say is the best piece of advice you ever received with hockey?
Well, I think, one thing that I always think back on is, and everybody's gone through it, right? So for you guys, example, you say you get advice from your wife, says, oh, you should go to physio. Your back's been bugging you, right? You should really go get that looked at. And you're like, nah, I'm not going to go do that. Then all of a sudden your old trainer, your doctor says, hey, you know what? I really think you should go get your back looked at, because, maybe you can get that fixed. And you're like, oh, really? Yeah. You think so? Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. I'll go and do that. Right. So it's listening. It's actually listening to the advice, right? Whether it's from hockey or, physical issues, whatever it is, actually listen to it, because people see things differently. Right. Someone just recently, actually, it was Alan May, who was just saying that when I was playing, he always got mad at me for not shooting the puck enough at the blue line. And I'm like, oh, damn, really? Like, he didn't think I shot enough. Like, obviously, I know why I wasn't shooting, because I was trying to play the game safe and I didn't want the puck to ever get blocked or turned over. But then I go back and think, and I'm like, damn it, my mom told me that every single time I talked to her. She's like, why don't you shoot it more, right? And I'm like, I wish I would have listened to all these people, because it's good advice, and people see things differently than you do. And it's hard sometimes to see that from the inside. So I'd say that the best advice that I got was some of the stuff I never listened to, was just was to take a little bit more chances, right? Do things a little bit differently, get out of your comfort zone. And I mean, I was always just so comfortable, playing D and staying in my bubble because that's what I thought made me successful instead of growing and getting better. And so yeah, maybe it's a weird answer, but the best advice was the stuff I never listened to. And it was coming at me from everywhere. So it was just pay more attention to that and take it in and actually think about it instead of just brushing it off.
Oh, that's a great answer.
It is a good answer. That's one of those interesting things that I don't know. You look back on all those things that were told to you, and I feel like a lot of hockey guys get out of hockey, and then you look back and say, there's a lot of regrets, right?
Mm-hmm.
On things that you could have done, should have done, and so yeah, a different answer than I totally expected for sure. But
well, I
agree.
Even to build on that too, this was something that it really pisses me off now to think about it, but like I was always taught to be, to just nose down, work hard, put in your work and be a good teammate and all that stuff. And I thought that I was always good at that. And so what happened, towards the end of my career in Montreal was I got healthy scratch for the first time that I ever been while I was there. I can't remember the exact number, but I was at like 600 something games straight. And then all of a sudden I get healthy scratch out of nowhere. First game of the season. And I'm just kind of like, okay, what's happening, right? Obviously somebody's going to talk to me and we're going to get this sorted out. 5 games goes by, 6, 7, not a single word from anybody. And finally, I think it was 8 games into the season. I still hadn't played. And the assistant coach talks to me, says, "Hey, I don't know what went on last year," because he was new. He's like, "But you're going to get in last game, just make the best of it." So play 2 games and then same cycle. I'm back out of the lineup, right? And all that's going through my head is like, let's go, let's work, show that I'm still committed, be a great teammate, all this stuff. And so that's what I did. Same thing. My agent talked to him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, just keep working hard. They'll see that and they'll get you back in there." And so fast forward a bunch, that's what happened. I ended up playing like 13 games over the next 2 years. And so I'm done playing. I talking to Bruce Boudreau, and I said, "Bruce, like, just out of curiosity, if you got a guy that's being healthy scratched, you're not saying anything, just working hard, good teammate, this and that. And then you have another guy who gets healthy scratched and he's just an asshole and he's not working and he's complaining and coming in the room every day. Like, who's the guy that's going to play?" He's like, "Unfortunately, the guy that's bitching all the time is going to play because I don't want to have to deal with it. So I'll get him in the lineup. The other guy, I just appreciate that he's coming in, doing his work and then getting out of here." And I'm like, damn it, like I wish I would have been a little bit more the squeaky wheel, get in the lineup a little bit more and play those games. And so it wasn't in my nature to do that, but it was, the advice I got after the fact that you have to be a little bit more of an advocate for yourself. And I'm learning that with kids now as well. You have to advocate for your kids. And we do that a little bit better, but I didn't advocate for myself enough. And so that was a lesson learned late, unfortunately, but it's a good lesson in life now.
Yeah. That's, you just made me kick myself. I didn't make it to 600 games before I, got the popcorn treatment. I got that right away. But I went about that, that was my whole career, was just making sure I was a good guy in the locker room. I'd show up every day just nervous to look at that board and see if I was on it. And if I wasn't, I'd take a couple minutes to reset and be like, "Okay, I'm going to be the whatever, I'm going to boost guys up. I'm going to go out and I'm going to push it on the bag skate. I'm, just never going to complain."
Yep.
I remember having a trainer, after I just got rinsed in St. Louis one time, I came off and he looked at me and he goes, "Strax, like, I think I hadn't played in a couple months," kind of thing. And he's just like, "Strax, you're getting like, they're giving it too hard and you haven't played forever. And I have never heard you say one like bad word. You come off every day with a smile on your face. Like, how do you do it?" And I was just happy to be there.
Yeah.
But then you see those other guys and yeah, they're not afraid to be vocal, and you know, like you said, the squeaky wheel, and then they end up getting in and getting play, and it doesn't seem fair, and that's not what you don't want to look at the culture and say to guys, hey, you guys should all be bitching about things.
Yeah.
But you definitely, the advocate, step up, have those conversations. That's something I've always told young guys. I'm like, if something's going on, don't be afraid to go in and have that conversation, right? Like,
yeah. Well, and you guys know too, right? Like, Carl, you've seen it with guys that you appreciate a good teammate that just puts in their work, and the ones that are out there always in the coach's ear and moping around the rink. It's like what's that guy doing? It pisses you off, right?
Yeah.
And you have to balance what's more important to you, right? Like your reputation, maybe amongst the players and at least and internally, versus your career, right? And whether or not that complaining is going to, further your career or whatever, I have no idea. Maybe in some cases, but you have to also you think about your reputation a little bit too. And it's like, you know what? Hopefully this doesn't end here, but at least the guys will see, like what I'm doing, and if that helps anybody get better. Like I look back when I played with Taylor Chorney in Washington, and that guy just worked his tail off, and he was out so many games, and every game he came in, he played great. Then he was back out again, and I appreciated that so much. And when I started going through this, I texted Chor, and I'm just like, dude, the only reason I'm doing this and getting through this right now without being a big baby is because I saw you do it. And so to me, that was more important at the time. But looking back on it now, I'm just like, I should have had a little bit more of a balance, and maybe a little bit more selfish, even though it's hard to say even now to be a little bit more selfish. But, you do have to think about that sometimes. So, it's whatever at this point.
As two ex-teammates, I know, you're number 2 on the podcast for a reason. The respect that, the respect you have, across the league, from fans and teammates is amazing. And I don't know. That's to me, that's the way I'd want to live my life, is to have that respect and live it, the right way, and then not be that guy. So I know what you mean. It's tough. You kind of kick yourself, and hockey's a tough life. So you're trying to figure out the best way to make that career, but at the same time, the reputation's important. So
yeah, I would say this: if it was my second year in the league, maybe I would have gone about it a little bit differently, because I would have been fighting for my life. I would have felt like I was backed into a corner. But I was lucky that was year 11 when that happened, and I had convinced Montreal to pay me a bunch of money. And so I was like, you know what, it's okay right now. I was trying to think about the positives, that we do have something good here. And so maybe that helped a lot. But yeah, I mean, if it was earlier in my career, I would have been, clawing to get back in there. But, it's a good lesson. I'll make sure I try and tell people about it as much as I can now, because everyone wants to know, like, how did it end? Why did this happen? I've had a lot of fans from Montreal ask me, like, what did you do to the coaches? Like, why did they hate you? And this and that. And it's like, I'm like, I don't have answers for you. I can't tell you. So it's just interesting. There's a lot of stuff that happens, as you guys know. There's a lot of things that happen in the room that no one ever gets to really hear details about.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. It seems like how many hockey players go out on their own terms?
Not many.
Very, very few, right? And so, yeah, but yours was an interesting case. You look at your social media, and that says unofficially retired, I believe.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, is that true? So, obviously it wasn't the way you want it, but that's kind of the way it was for all of us, I think. You kind of, it just happens, and that's one of the scary things, and that's one of the parts of what I guess we're trying to do with this is, it's hard to plan, right? It's most people go to school, get out at 22, get a job, and just slowly work their way up their ladder, and that's their career projection, right? Where we're in our 20s and we get that opportunity, and you want to make the most of it, and you don't know when that transition is going to come. So take advantage of the time that you have while you're playing, and make those relationships and learn as much as you can. And, if you can look back and think how valuable those conversations with your neighbor instead of picking weeds were.
Exactly. I was multitasking, actually. I was talking and picking.
There you go. Yeah,
No, but I mean, you guys are right, though. It's I guarantee you guys have had the conversation with lots of people where they always ask you, like, what's your plan B, right? Like, what happens if this doesn't work, and you're always like, no, it's going to work, right? Like, I'm going to play in the NHL. It's going to be great. And no worries, right off into the sunset. But, to me, and obviously, with you guys as well, that's not enough, right? Not enough just saying that it's going to work. You have to take the extra time to think about it. And for me, I wasn't hitting the books, away from the rink and trying to get myself smarter and smarter. I was trying to, meet more and more people, and build more and more bonds. That's the type of person I am. Is I try and reach out to as many of my ex-teammates as possible once a month, once every few months, and even a year, whatever it is. Or if I see something on social media, just, a message here and there to try and keep up that relationship. Just because you never know, might be able to help somebody out at some point. They might be able to help you out. And that was what my investment into my post-hockey career was, right? Was getting to meet people like Steve Alexi, for example. Like, you guys know Steve Alexi, right? Like, just recently he retired finally, and we've been keeping in touch. And I was asking what he was up to now, and he told me he was trying to figure out what next phase was. And I'm like, I got an opportunity for you. And I called up a guy that I met in this cybersecurity world, and I'm like, hey, got this guy, played with him in Wash, ex-hockey player, great guy, great relationship guy. I think he'd be awesome for cybersecurity sales. He's like, send him my info. So send over the info, and Steve-O's got a job. Now he's working in the industry too, right? So it's just like,
that's awesome.
To me, that was my investment in my plan B. And so far it's working, but yeah, it's just kind of goes back to always thinking about, where things could end.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And gosh, full of like really good wisdom there, Karl. And I don't know if like partway through there, it was like an indirect jab at me, because like I was that nerd on our bus. Like I was studying, and the guys would give me a hard time. I think I was probably one of the CFA exams that I was grinding on back in those days. But really good insight for young guys coming up in their career. And then just to transition a little bit, we help people with planning, and you mentioned things in terms, you were able to sign a nice deal there in Montreal, and financially that clearly it was able to support you and your family. But just what would you say financially, maybe the best piece of advice you were given throughout your career, or for some people, you learned some of your best financial lessons really early on from mom or dad. But what would you say in terms of best financial advice you've received?
It's a hard question, because like I knew nothing about finance, nothing about. I did no idea where to go, and so I leaned heavily on my agent at the beginning to kind of guide me towards a couple advisors. And then after that, it was just based off of, who I gelled with, who I thought our visions kind of aligned. And, I grew up with, my parents always were, it was like a lot of people, paycheck to paycheck. We're investing all of our money in the kids and their sports, and we'll just figure everything else out on the back end. And so for me, I was like, I need somebody that's going to help me save, right? It's going to keep me in line here and make sure that I don't get myself into a situation when I'm older. And so we found that person, and his right from the start was always like, this is our goal for you when everything is done, right? So let's build towards that goal. And so I've always tried to set goals in hockey, but in finance, I was never really thinking about that, right? You're just thinking about that next 2-week paycheck, like, let's just get that in the bank and we'll figure it out after. But then he gave me these goals, and I'm just like, okay, like, this is what we build towards right here. So So I thought that was nice that it was laid out. It was, let's think 10 years down the road here, right? Let's not just think about 2 weeks once you get your paycheck. So I thought that was very helpful. And then a lesson that I learned was the lesson that a lot of young athletes learn, I think, is someone comes to you with an investment idea and you're like, oh, it's a guarantee. You can't lose, right? We're going to quadruple our money here. And me, along with 5, I think, other teammates, my wife's parents, bunch of people ended up investing some money in something, and it went belly up. Turned out that the management was not great, which were things we had no idea about. Probably didn't do enough due diligence. So I learned there, be a little bit smarter. Don't be so reactive with something. When someone says it's a sure thing, it's probably not a sure thing, right? There isn't really anything like that. Never is. No. So I learned.
Never is.
I was lucky that I didn't put a ton of money into it, but I learned right away that it can happen to anybody, right? It's not just a story that you hear. It happens, and so I learned that the hard way pretty quick, and so I'm a little bit more cautious these days with that.
It's unfortunate, but I think a lot of us go through that, right? It's as much as many people through your lives would give you the advice and tell you, be smart, do this, blah blah blah. You get in those situations, and a lot of us make those mistakes, right? And you kind of have to learn it for yourself, and that sucks. I know that's a big piece of everything that I talk about all the time is a lot of the mistakes I made along the way. So. But they teach you. They're hard lessons to learn. But I mean, it's why, talk about taking the jab at Crolsey. I was lucky enough that he was that guy that, from day one that I met him at university, he had a goal in mind that, he was going to go as far as he could in hockey, but he was focused that he was going to, be in finance, right? And he had this dream and he created this firm. And so my last, 3-4 years of playing was, doing the Johan, started studying, did the MBA and everything, started working towards it. And so kind of the first half of my career was making terrible decisions and learning from them. And now I get the opportunity to have this podcast and have this kind of platform where we can come on and, and share some of those bad stories and hopefully it helps some of the guys along the way. But like you said, there's never a free lunch, right? So anytime, and there's so many of those in the locker room, right? How many guys come in and say
so much bad stuff? The stuff that comes across our desk, like, what do you think about this? It's like, oh my goodness, does this look bad? Like,
I can only imagine, right? And that's the thing. Going back to my financial guy, it's like he's really great at bringing me back down to life. My wife is as well, because I've always been an ideas guy. I'm always like, let's try this out. Let's give this a shot. And there is an element of that being good. Sometimes you do have to take that risk to make that investment to move up the ladder and stuff like that. And I have done that since, but it's a little bit more calculated, right? Like it's the same thing going back to listening to advice from your wife and the doctor, your mom and the TV guy or the ex-player, right? It's listen to everybody, right? And get a bit more of a well-rounded picture, because I'm not an expert in this. I know, like, I'll give you an example. I invested in a product fairly recently, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, that sure enough, 2 other teammates ex-teammates have invested in. But this time around, the only thing that went through my mind is like, hey, remember we got rinsed last time? Like, let's figure out who runs this thing. Let's figure out where this money's going. All the things, all the questions that you should ask. And there's still an element of unknown that's there, but it was a calculated risk, and enough money that you're willing to lose and all that stuff. And we're in a position like that. But I wanted to get back to the jab. My internet was cutting out and I wanted to rebuttal. I wasn't taking a jab at you. I was jealous of that. Like I wish that I could have done that, but I was I was more focused on, wanting to get in the card game or, catching up on that show. And I didn't have that, in the back of my mind thinking I really should spend this time learning. And then towards the end of my career, when I was going up and down in Montreal, that's when it first started coming to me. It's like, you know what, why didn't I spend more time learning these things, right? Like I've been sitting in a hotel room for way too many nights staring at the TV when I should have been doing something else. So then the last 2 years, I spent, doing a little bit more research. I tried to teach myself Mandarin the 1 year. And I'm just like, why wasn't I doing this stuff?
By the way,
It's freaking hard. It's extremely hard.
So, yeah.
I ended up stopping because my pronunciation on this one sentence wasn't good enough. So it wouldn't let me graduate to the next level. And I didn't know how to circumvent the system. So I was just like, what do I do? So I ended up stopping. So I got like very, very basic stuff. And I haven't taken it up since because Mandy thinks that it's a waste of time, but I don't know. Maybe we'll get back into it at some point. You never know. Cybersecurity and what's going on in China with their cybersecurity. I mean, it could be good.
Yeah.
It could also be a red flag that I'm learning it. So who knows, right? Government's watching that stuff too.
You're on a list somewhere, right?
I'm on a list now. I have Rosetta Stone Mandarin. I've been put on a list.
That's awesome, Karl. Yeah. All right. So obviously we talked hockey, we talked finance a little bit. And just what we always like to kind of close, just very, very big picture, like just life in general, guy, advice that you would give younger guys starting out. But best advice you ever received, just life in general.
Well, I think we kind of touched on it, like with the squeaky wheel stuff, right? Like I think that I think you need to be a good person, obviously, first and foremost. Yeah. I think that is the best advice. Be a good person, and it's standard. Treat people the way you want to be treated. But I think that you can be a yes man or a yes person and always say yes to everything. But you also need to learn when to say no, when to take time for yourself, when to realize is this investment of time worth it for you, right? I think that's something that I'm still trying to learn right now because I've if somebody says, what's the song? You find out who your friends are, right? Somebody's going to drop everything. I think that's great. I think that's great to a point, but I also think that you need to figure out investing your time wisely as well as your money. Making sure that you are doing the things that check your box, check your family's box, and then check whatever your day-to-day life, your business box is as well, right? Don't just keep checking off the box. I helped my friend out today. Oh, I did this for that person. I answered that call, like this is family time. This is work time. This is you time, right? So I think I'd say that's kind of what I'm really working on right now is more life management, making sure that you fill up all the cups, not overflow one and leave one just running on fumes. So it's always a work in progress, man. I am so far from perfect, but I'm trying to at least get closer to being even, right? We've taken so much time. We've monopolized so much time ourselves trying to play hockey, right? That it's time to give back while still trying to fill up your cup.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Especially in today's day and age, I think, you get pulled in so many directions. And I don't know. I find if you learn how to do it, like, please come teach me. Because I think that just in me that, small town Saskatchewan guy, it's like, if the neighbor, whatever happens there, I'll drop everything. And, and I'm over there helping, and I feel good about myself doing that. But at some point you start saying, man, I took a lot of time away from, other things that I could be doing. And you're trying to find that work-life balance and, getting into this second career, the amount of 2:30 in the mornings I've done, and, where I could be spending time with my wife. Right. So it's like, it's always going to be a constant battle. Johan's been doing this for 8-9 years now.
9 years. Our own business now for about 9 years. Yes.
And how many times have I heard you say, man, just next year, I'm not going to do 14 hours at the office, you know, like I'm going to get home and spend that extra time with the family. And it's always going to be a constant battle. Right. So I think that's super good advice. It's something that we could all definitely learn from and we'll probably battle with for forever.
Yeah.
But, it's why it's one of those things why we think you're such a great guy.
Yeah. I like the word being really intentional, right?
Yeah.
Like just you got to be so intentional, prioritizing what's most important to you. Right. And,
I was with, we try and do, like getting back to staying in touch with people. So, Holtby moved back to DC as well, Mike Green as well. And so trying to make sure that we take time to hang out with each other, right? Like, because you get so caught up with kids and everything else going on that you don't. And so we go for coffee once a week. And so we went this morning and we were talking about text messages on your phone, right? We were saying how, me and Mandy are both, we try and be very diligent with a text. Like if we get it, if you can't respond right away for because obviously something really important is happening, make sure you get back, right? If it needs a response, obviously. Yeah. Even if it's just a thumbs up, whatever, get back to the person. And so I try my best to do that. And we were talking today and Holtz is like, he's like, yeah, I'm bad at that. I sometimes just don't respond. And we're like, do you leave like unopened text messages on your phone? He's like, a few. We're like, how many do you have right now? He's like 300 something. I'm like, oh my God, how do you do that? Like that's 300 people. 300 messages that you haven't got back to. And then thought about for a second, I'm like, man, I'm kind of jealous, like I'm kind of jealous that I could disconnect enough to focus on some of the things that I need to do instead of, whatever it is, staying up till midnight, answering the text messages you didn't answer. But, it goes back to being, we said you have a standard for yourself and people ask something of you, you want to get there for them. But yeah, it's a balance. So I'm trying to take a little bit of Holt's life advice too. Just learning every day, right?
Yep. Oh, that's
funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we and I've been doing this more recently, but like I'll try to go a 24-hour period. So usually it's like Saturday afternoon to Sunday afternoon where I just don't have my phone.
Yeah,
I just like hide it in my I just throw it in a drawer. And like I'll text like, mom, dad, and people that would get worried about me if they don't hear about it. But like, it is so liberating, like not having your phone and like driving somewhere without it is so liberating. It's awkward at first, but it feels
good.
So good. So,
well, I don't take up too much of your guys' time, but I always have like stories or ways to relate. I did that once when I was playing, like, you know what? I'm so sick of this thing. I'm going to leave it in the car tonight. And I'm going to get it in the morning. I'm just not going to think about the phone. So I go and pick it up the next morning. And I had 13 missed calls, about 20 text messages. And it was from our PR guy. And I had 2 radio interviews to do that evening that I forgot about. I'm like, I guess I can't completely disconnect, right? You can never quite do that. And I'm like, when I retire, I'm disconnecting. I'm getting rid of this thing. I'm going to get a flip phone and no internet on it. And, now I get into the thing that I'm doing now and it's just not possible. So I like that idea though. Do it on the weekend. You can keep it close. You don't have to check it all the time, right?
Yeah. You just ahead of time, you got to let your people that would be worried about you, just let them, I'm not going to have my phone. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
In cybersecurity, they don't probably look highly on flip phones.
They'd probably think it's more secure, honestly.
Yeah. You're
harder to hack
right.
into. Yeah.
But I mean, just to go back to that, I mean, what you said about being intentional, because, I mean, working with Johan, that's just one of those things now that we know, it's like the weekend is family time. And, for that period, he's not going to, so I don't reach out to him on the weekend. And that's his time to be with family. And I think I've respected that so much. It's not something I've been able to do myself. But, hopefully we get there at some point. You and I will eventually put our phones away.
It's a little bit at a time, right? Just baby steps. But I mean, I'm curious now that I have you guys here. Look, I would love to know what you guys' advice would be right now with everything happening, right? Like, it's crazy for a lot of people. Panic button being hit everywhere, especially with finance and all that stuff. I'm curious what's the advice you've been giving people?
Gosh, well, that's I could take a couple hours and answer that. Like the maybe 60-second answer would be like you need to have a plan, right? There, like uncertainty. There will always be uncertainty in one way or another. So like short term, I know it's cliche, but like from a financial planning perspective, we always say, hey, like if there are certain funds that you need in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years, like they should not be at risk at all. They should be very liquid, and just don't expose yourself to risk in the short term, because anything can happen, right? And then more intermediate, you take a little bit more risk with funds you might need 3 to 10 years from now. And longer term, like you embrace that uncertainty, knowing that things will be volatile, and you try to earn a return that's going to be in excess of inflation, right? And I know how, at least half of what I just say is quite cliche, but there's hundreds of years of data that supports that's a very prudent and sound way of kind of looking at it and planning. And so I don't know, Strax, what is it? Would you add anything else to that?
Well, yeah, just I mean, to use your own words about the panic buttons and stuff, it's like one of the first things we talk to people about, and everybody's different in their levels of it, but if you're not waking up every morning and turning on MSNBC or like the people that are hitting the panic buttons and all that stuff that you're listening to, like it's just all clutter, right? It's people out there that make a living off of
selling you that fear.
Either we're going to the moon or the sky is falling. It's one or the other, right? They're not going to come out and say, hey, everything's okay. You know, it's just not what's going to happen. So, like Johan said, you put a plan together. You mentioned it earlier about the investments that, once you kind of learn that stuff, it's, there's a certain amount that you're willing to lose, right? Willing to risk, risk and reward is the most simple concept of finance, right? The most basic thing. So it's, finding a plan that works for everybody. Hockey's interesting because we always have that, you're trying to bridge that gap, right? There's only a handful of guys in the league that really are making enough money that they're just going to live off that money, until retirement, right? So you need to have a plan. 99% of us look back on our career, like you said, and said, man, how much time did I have that I could have been learning this stuff? Johan's the 0.01% that
the exception
sat and read textbooks on the bus.
Well,
and
it might have just been I wasn't good enough at hockey, one or the other.
I'm not sure about that.
No, it's not the hockey. Maybe you weren't into cards enough, like, but I mean, one of the things on this side that I've noticed is, hockey players love thinking that they're busy. And I mean, in a way we are, but I mean, our focus was always, everything was about being the best hockey player you could be the next day, right? So every day was just a circle of, making sure you got sleep, eat, right? All that stuff. It was all focus. How many naps we took and stuff, that really, if you look back on it, probably could have been, taking in a half-hour podcast or something, just learning something, right? On that bus ride, that plane ride, instead of, jumping in the card game, etc. But it's hard when you're in it. And then, like you said, you start to get to the end, you see it, and all of a sudden, that's when you start hitting the panic button, going like, do I have a plan? Like, am I ready for this? Because I know for you, it ended, not the way you wanted it to. For me, it ended not the way I wanted it to. It just doesn't work out for most guys like that. We don't all sail off into the sunset. So, if you early on can, one of the biggest things I keep thinking about, the longer I'm in this, And I wish that really the NHL and the PA and stuff got more involved in this, but, just on an education side, of talking to the young guys, because we sat through all of those meetings at the beginning of the year where they talk about, how to talk to girls and not text and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You think they couldn't spend 5 minutes and say, here's 3 good questions you could, when somebody approaches you with a financial, investment, blah, 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 or, you're interviewing advisors, here's some good things to look at, right? Yeah. Like just simple things. But, again, that's the point of, why Johan created this group and now why we're having this podcast. And hopefully we got enough guys on here sharing those lessons and some people will listen.
Yeah, I definitely think you'll get that. And I love what you said. And hockey players thinking that they're busy all the time. It's so freaking true. I'm thinking how much free time we had then that I wish that I still had. So no, it's good. That's all really great advice. And so many people they want to think about money. They just want to boil the ocean. They want it all now. Let's do it. Let's get it. And it's just, it's a patient game and you got to be smart about it and listen to people like you. So that's good stuff.
And it's hard. It's the keeping up with the Joneses stuff too is a little bit hard, right? Everybody's got a different level, so that's tough too. Stay 100%. Within your means.
We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. JV, any last things you want to mention? Any causes, charities, or anything we can give a little bit of?
There's so much going on right now. It'll take another hour just to explain everything. But eventually, me and Holtby are working on some charity stuff out here. We're going to get a slow pitch game and home run derby going. Hopefully, towards the end of this summer. Just one of the other things that we trying to give back to this area. So we'll get there at some point. But yeah, the rest of the stuff. It's just what we do. Just trying to pick away at things. So we'll keep grinding. I'll let you guys know if this latest investment with teammates flies or falls flat. I'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, please do. Well, I know you guys. DC is lucky that they got you guys back there. You guys are kind of a heart and soul. You've been there for a long time, and I see the fans just. Messages and stuff, excited to have you guys back in town. So I'm pumped for you that you got back into hockey broadcasting. That's really cool. So we appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me and good luck with this. I'm sure you guys can do great.
Thanks.
Through this podcast, the information provided by the Hockey Wealth Group is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, or legal advice. You should consult a financial professional familiar with the specific circumstances of your unique financial situation before making any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mentioned rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Johan Kroll, CFA, CFP, and Tyson Strachan, MBA, are investment advisor representatives of Oceanside Advisors DBA, the Hockey Wealth Group, an SEC-registered investment advisor.